Greetings and salutations everyone, my name is Caden and Nighthawk and welcome back to the Let's Code, Let's Dev, whatever you want to call it, series of the Megaman X platformer. So, what have we accomplished so far? Well, for the last 10 parts we've accomplished many things. Of course, we've developed basic platform mechanics and animation handling controllers, including jumping around and even wall jumping, and of course more recently with the dashing control and the dot controllers. Further on down the stage, we've developed cameras, or camera controllers, so we can move about the stage and orientate the camera however we would like. We also have drop-down platformers and also moving platforms from our previous coding as well. And now it's time to figure out where can we go from here, because it looks like at this point we have like a basis for our building the game, and it's like, oh, what else can we do? Well, I've been conjuring up in my other builds, trying to figure out what I would like to continue forth with here, and I think I have got a good list here. So what I have set up here today is two dummy enemy objects that I would like to use for demonstration before going further into developing our enemies for the player here in the future. So the goal I want to have by the next part is to have this enemy here just be a test subject. Like you can infinitely shoot it and not destroy it, but this one here, you will be able to destroy it. Additionally, I want to set it so this thing does not inflict any damage, and this one will inflict damage on you as well. So, and also when we do attack it, I want to be able to display a hit counter and also how much health is left, but we will cover that in the next part. So what I want to cover in this part is some advanced damage mechanics for dealing damage with your projectiles, because the way we have it currently set up right now is, if you can look at this chart here with just the enemy up here at the top and then this group of instances with the categorized variables of small hit, medium hit, and big hit. We can use any of these projectiles to attack the enemy and then deal the same amount of damage within each projectile in each of these classes. What I want to do by the end of this part is create an array system or a master controller for the weapons, so that we can define how much damage each individual projectile does to each and every enemy object index. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get started. So there's not much we need to do in terms of setting things up. All we need to do is create one script and then also modify some of our current instances. So, well, of course, what I did off camera is I made a group for our enemies, and I put our two dummy enemies here. They have nothing in them. Well, actually, just a create event and some child variables. I'll get to what this means later when we go into an introductory to enemies here. So let's go ahead and close out of that, and then here's the first thing we're going to do. We're actually going to go into our player here and go into weapons. Actually, no. We'll go into controllers, and if you can recall, we defined these three controllers here: control weapon large, control weapon medium, and control weapon small. These are some master. Let's see these are some controllers that are parented to our master weapon, and these are basically classes of projectiles that will do the same damage to the object as I've just described earlier. So with that unfortunate thing being out of the way, we are going to delete control weapon small, and if you get any warnings that's saying they're still on references, this is referencing to the child object that's being parented to. Just go ahead and hit yes, and then rinse and repeat for control weapon medium and control weapon large. And then you'll notice in your projectiles that there's no parent now. We want to set the parent to the master weapon controller here, which is in Megaman X controllers, control weapon master, and hit OK, and just rinse and repeat with your other projectiles that you have so far. Let's see, that, and that. And then for our chart shot, we'll go ahead and do player X controllers weapon master and hit OK. All right, that's all good and golden, and you can see here I've removed the create event as well off camera. That is because we are going to be defining most of these variables in our script, or not just in our script, but also perhaps in our master controller here. But we're going to go ahead and actually get ready to write that script, because basically what the script is going to do, it's a master create event for all the projectiles for the array systems. What we're looking to do is we're looking to set some variables for how much damage each projectile wants to do and how much recovery time the enemy has before it can get damaged again. So like we have to wait X amount of frames to do to do more damage. No, wait. We have to wait X amount of frames before we can damage it again. There we go. Sorry. But additionally, what we can do here is we can set the projectile effect when colliding with something. We can also set the speed that it moves at, and so on and so forth. So the only slight disadvantage too is for every time you add a new projectile or enemy, you have to keep adding a case or you have to keep adding to it. But the reason I'm doing this is I believe it is better than to go into every single object and define how much damage it does there and how much there's other variables there too. So yeah. Okay. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and create a script in the player group here. And then I'm going to call this script get damage constants. And then to make a note of like what this is, we'll just do a triple comment here and say get damage constants object index. When you go into your create event for the master controller later, you will literally type this in as is, because what it's going to do is we're going to be creating a switch statement based on this argument 0 that we put in, and the argument we put in is the object index of the projectile. So we'll have a case for the X buster, we'll have a case for the mid charge, we'll have a case for the charge shot, and we'll have cases for future projectiles that we add in the future. So just so what I just said here is say for later, I'm going to add a block comment and say this script gathers data for projectiles. For projectiles being shot by the player to apply damage for later. And this additionally saves the hassle from defining these in each and every object. It is all in one instance. Hopefully. I say hopefully, but in reality, it turns out it actually is. So we're just going to say local variable. This is optional to put this code in here, but just for organization purposes, I'm going to say var a is equal to argument 0, and then create another block comment. Argument 0. There we go. Make another block comment that says this. Just a big old switch statement, as I mentioned before, indicating which projectiles have what properties. All right, so currently we have three projectiles we are working with, as I mentioned before, the X buster, the mid charge, and the charge shot. So basically we need to make 3 cases. So we're going to do switch A. And if you wanted to, you can also make a default case if you didn't want to define all of the projectiles independently for now. If you just wanted to do a temp placeholder damage, you can use the default case as this. And I'll go ahead and write that out here. Just actually, no, you know what? No, let's actually start with the default case. Why not? So we'll open and close some curly braces, and at the bottom, always remember to put in your break statements, because if you never put in this line, it's gonna break, as you have saw in previous episodes where some of my switch statements did not really work out as well, like in the check index and the animate player scripts, just to name a couple. So we're gonna set if you remember setting the variable SPD, which is the speed of the projectile, we're gonna set that to a default value of 5. And then we're going to set the proj effect to 0 for now. Later on, when we when we work with our master weapon controller, we're gonna basically define to say, hey, if the proj effect is equal to 0, we're just going to give it a default projectile effect. Otherwise, if it's not 0, we're basically the code's going to look for what the object index is that we've defined approach effects. So say I can say coal charged plasma, and basically it will create the instance of coal charged plasma. But if approach effect is set to 0, then it will create a default projectile effect, in which this case we are going to do just the regular plasma collision. So now there's also another damage mechanic I would like to do, being penetration versus resistance. This ideal fundamental being, is there enough strength in the projectile to actually shear through the enemy? And if so, it will do that, but if not, it will destroy right at the instant it collides with it. So we will cover more of this later on in the second part of this block of tutorials, I guess. So basically in the next part. But for now, we're going to go ahead and define the variable penetration here. But first, we're going to make a comment saying determining if resistance, which resistance is going to be defined in our enemies later on, can destroy a projectile. And we're just going to set a default value of penetration to say, I don't know, maybe 0.5. If it's the way that I'm going to do it too, for smaller projectiles, like say our little lemons, we'll have a really small penetration value. But if it's a big lemon, then you might want a bigger penetration value, say of maybe 5 or 4. Nothing too big, but just enough to pass through the enemy in question. I'm going to set this to 0.25 for now. And now we're going to go ahead and start making some arrays, which is going to be the amount of damage we give to a specific enemy, and then the recovery time that this enemy is going to have. So now, considering that this is the default case, what I was going to do is define the array, or some indices in the array for each and every individual enemy. But because all of our enemies are going to be parented to an enemy controller, then we can assume to say at the beginning this. So for applying damage, like the amount of damage we're going to be doing to our enemies, I'm going to be using the variable name damage class. Oh, that's not spelled correctly. Damage class. And then I'm going to put in a name for our enemy controller, which I'm going to call C2. Yes, 1. And then I'm going to go ahead and make a comment saying what this does. Set damage amount. And then I'm going to also set a recovery time, which is basically how many frames do we need to wait before we can damage this instance again. And the variable name I'm going to be using for this is recover CTRL underscore enemy is going to be equal to 30, which is basically half of the room speed current, which is 60 frames per second. So basically half a second. So yeah. What I'm going to do too is go ahead and define that enemy controller, and then create a group in our stage enemies, and then name the group controllers, and then create an object saying CTRL underscore enemy, and just call it good there for now. I'm going to go ahead and also quickly parent these dummy enemies to said controller. Oh, that will create a little bit of parents. Whoops, my bad. Controllers. Oh, enemies, controllers. There we go. All right, cool. And okay. Okay. So yeah, this is like the basic building foundations for a script here. And literally what we can do is for each new case we want to find, we can copy what we have so far, and then say case obj xbuster, and probably say the same thing. Actually, no, we got to paste that in. So I want the speed of this projectile to move at about 6 pixels. And the projectile effect is actually going to be coal underscore plasma. The penetration value I'm going to change to 0.15. But instead of Well, actually, no. Here's the, considering that the damage cost is going to be set for every enemy, I'm going to just keep everything as is here, since, well, to be fair, I guess the X-Buster, just the not charged version of the projectile just does not that much damage, because you really got to charge every shot to go blam, 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 essentially. So I'm going to actually leave this and test that. Because in my other build, I define damage cost for all the object indexes individually. A little tedious, but then again, if I use control enemy here, it should make sense. However, but for a different case, for say case obj x mid charge, we'll go ahead and paste that in. Well, we want the speed to be a little bit quicker. Oh, and make sure you open that up with a colon there. And then we'll set our projectile effect again to be col_plasma. We're going to set our default projectile effect to be col_plasma, so you can either say col_plasma or 0, but it's just for good organization purposes, just to kind of keep track of what's doing it. All right, so the penetration I'm going to keep at 0.2, no, actually I'll do 0.30, but then I'm going to, but for the cases where it's going to be a projectile that does different amount of damage to different enemies, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to go ahead and copy this line of code here and paste it down, because currently we have two enemies here, which means we'll need two variables or for each of our arrays here. But then I'm going to replace this argument here with obj dummy 1 and then obj dummy 2. And then same thing for here. Actually, you know what? I think actually it'd be the same. I think I'm going to do the same thing here. But if you want the recovery time to be different for independent enemies, then you would do the same thing here, but replace damage cost with recover, and then set different values as you must. So, with that being said, we recall that when we do damage to the dummy 1, we actually don't want to damage it, but actually I do want to damage dummy 2. I'm going to set that value to not 32, just 3. So now I'll actually do a case for objx, no, nx charge shot here. Nope. And then that. I'm going to set the speed to 8, the projectile fed to actually be col_charged plasma, and then the penetration value I'm going to set to 1.5. Let's start with that. We can always tinker with this value later on. And I'm going to set the damage class variable here to 8 for the dummy 2, and the recover time I'm going to set individually. So for dummy 1, I'm going to set the recover time to 10. And then I'm going to replace control enemy with dummy 1. Excuse me, obj_dummy 1, and then obj_dummy 2, and then breaking in the statement. And that essentially is the script done. So let me reiterate too, whenever you add another projectile, you'll need to copy a case and then paste whatever you had. But whenever you have a new enemy, you'll need to go into each and every case and define a new damage class and a new recover entry for said enemy. Unless if it's going to apply to all enemy controllers, then you would do that. You probably won't have to worry about that. So let's go ahead and close out on that for now. And then we're going to move on to our master controller here, and then we're going to the create event and the initialize variables. You can see I already have SPD defined here, but actually that script that we just made is going to take care of this create event for all of our projectiles. So we're basically just going to say get damage constants. You can see my text turns blue. For you, if you didn't adjust your theme, it may be yellow, and that's okay. This is just to kind of differentiate between a function and a script. So if, for example, if I say here instance destroy, your script the script when you enter in case sensitive, they will look like this text color here, but I have it set to a different color just to differentiate between the two. And I'm just, for the argument, I'm just going to put object index as it says down here in this note. And that's all we need to do. So now for the step event, I'm going to go into here, and this is our speed and direction controller. I'm setting the image angle equal to the direction of travel, and the motion set being to direction and speed. An SPD being defined in our script, and so that's all good to go. When we have a collision with the floor, we're going to create a collision effect, and this is what I was talking about if projectile effect was equal to 0. So if it's not equal to 0, we're basically saying new effect, x, y, like the x coordinate of the projectile, the y coordinate of the projectile, and then the projectile effect that was defined in our get damaged constants and script. Otherwise, we're setting the default projectile effect to call plasma, and we're destroying the instance, calling it good. Additionally, if we're outside of the view 0, we destroy the instance, but I'm pretty sure that was already defined. But if I go ahead and hit OK and run the game, we should see similar properties as if we had 3 class controllers for each weapon here. So if I go ahead and shoot, good. But you can see here the muzzle flash travels, but so actually that was a mistake on my end. I need to change the speed of the projectiles here back to 0. Oh, wait, not that one, not that one, that's okay. 0, 0, and 0. Why did I do this? Because if you happen to notice and recall from setting up our projectiles, we made an animation end event here, and it adjusts the speed for us like this. So now if I run the game, how do we do this in right? Jeez. The player spawns in and we can shoot, and as you can see, the muzzle flash remains the same. We have our collision projectile here. Everything is working fantastic, and of course that all works wonderfully as well. Cool. So that is the beginning of setting up our projectile damage mechanics here, and this will help jump right into the next part, which is the introductory to enemies. So thank you guys so much for watching this tutorial. I have been Caden or Nighthawk, and I will see you guys later. Bye-bye.